Welcome to Flight of Nova. This is a space simulator game that is heavily focused on the flight mechanics and particularly physics of space flight, as well as the physics of atmospheric flight. And in this tutorial, I will teach you how to deorbit or leave the orbit on a planet and then fly through the atmosphere and finally land on a planetary base. So I'm using an Xbox controller, and if you want to follow my control scheme, that is what I'm using. So we will go to free flight mode, and in this case for the tutorial we'll be flying a shuttle CF2, which is a smaller spacecraft compared to the larger freighters that are used to ferry cargo, particularly from space or the planet and vice versa. So we will select the shuttle, and then we will fly from station BCA 188. So we will load into the game. Therefore we have spawned, and the ship systems are booting. You can view, span the camera around, switch the camera mode, and as we pan around you can see that we are docked on this station Becca or BCA. And if you look at the bottom right, we see our altitude or height above sea level is 185 kilometers, so we are well in space. At the bottom left we see our velocity or speed is 7,800 meters per second, so we are flying at a very high speed of 7,800 meters every second. And what we want to do is then leave the station. So first we go back to the ship, and we want to refuel to ensure that we have enough hydrogen supply in our engines or in our tanks. Then we will undock. We have undocked from the pod. So what I like to do is just leave the vicinity of the station. So I will use my RCS thrusters to just translate away from the station. So the RCS thrusters are just on the sides, every side of the ship or this space shuttle. You can see the white plume of the gas as it leaves the ship. So those are the RCS thrusters. So once we are leaving, you can see the beautiful views of the magnificent desert planet. We will then also use our RCS thrusters to orient the ship towards the front. So now we have left the vicinity of the ship, and as we pan around, if you look at the flight data at the top left, you see there's a lot of data there, but what's most important is the two circles. So the smaller inner blue circle represents the planet, in this case, as you can see, and then the upper white larger circle represents the orbital path. And if you look closely, it's circular. That means that if you continue flying in this path towards the front, that's the blue circle, or rather with that blue circle, and then behind or the opposite direction, our backside or rather in the opposite direction is the circle with the cross. Therefore, if you continue flying in this path, we will fly seemingly infinitely, because in space and this altitude there is simply no particles that can resist our motion. So we would fly through that circular path forever. Therefore, in order for us to deorbit or to leave orbit of this planet and then go to the surface, what we have to do is slow ourselves down. And because we can't slow ourselves down with any other resistance like air, we will have to burn our engines in the opposite direction. So what we have to do is first use the RCS thrusters to reorient ourselves in the retrograde or the opposite direction. So we just burn, we just engage our RCS thrusters, once we are facing behind, we maintain that path. Then we will then burn our main engines. We burn our engines in this opposite direction, make a retrograde burn, and then decelerate. So watch what happens to the orbital path at the top left once we burn our main engines. As you can see, the orbital path, the white one, stops being circular, it then becomes elliptical, meaning that if we continue flying in that path, we will ultimately hit the surface or the blue circle of the planet. So that means that we have decelerated, and then we are going to leave the planets, or the orbit of the planet. So in order for us to shorten our journey towards the planet, we will further burn the engines more. We will burn our engines more to decelerate to about at the bottom left we are at about 7,400. We will decelerate to about 4,200 meters per second. So we continue burning our main engines. Now we have successfully decelerated to about 4,200 meters per second. Now we will reorient our spacecraft towards the front, or the prograde direction. Now if you look at the orbital path at the top left, you can see that now if we just continue flying in that white path, we will eventually hit the ground very soon, and that is what we want in order for us to deorbit. So at this moment, all you do is sit tight and wait for gravity to do its job. At the bottom right, you see our altitude is dropping very quick now at 150 kilometers height above sea level. So the moment we hit 100 kilometers, that's when space will end, and then we will hit air particles. Because space on Earth starts at 100 kilometers, this game models this desert planet similar to Earth. So at about 100 kilometers, we will meet a lot of air resistance, and due to the atmosphere. So don't worry about that. I will show you how to do that. And because this spacecraft has a heat shield, we will reorient our heat shield so that we protect the integrity of the hull, and we don't lose the wings or flight surfaces, including the engines. So the moment we hit 100 kilometers, you want to reorient the ship with the nose pointing upwards, so that the heat shield is contacting the air molecules, and we can then decelerate ourselves. And then at the right, you see our air density is rising. Then we ensure that our angle of entry is about 30 degrees. And now at 100 kilometers altitude, you see that the air molecules are now hitting the ship. We are dropping at about 4,000 meters per second, at about Mach 13, or 13 times the speed of sound. So this is still very high, but because we have a heat shield, we will ensure that that is what hits the ship. I mean, that's what the heat shield is, what hits the air first. experiencing quite high heat. However, we have managed to survive, and we are now cooling. You can see there are no more heating in the red. The ship is now gliding through the atmosphere at about 30 kilometers of altitude. So we have successfully survived the atmospheric re-entry and survived one of the hardest legs of the journey. So because this is not a rocket, it has flight surfaces, we will then turn the spacecraft towards the left so that you can land at one of the stations. Ensure you, when you are turning quite gently, because the game models the the atmospheric effects, including the G-forces. You do not want to kill your pilot or even lose the flight surfaces due to very high resistance. You can see our pilot loses focus, or their eyes start to black out the moment we go very high acceleration due to G-forces. So if you also look at the bottom left, you can see that our velocity is declining very fast. Now we are at Mach 2.6. This is because unlike a conventional aircraft, this spacecraft has very small or short flight surfaces. It doesn't have the large wings, flight surfaces like a conventional aircraft. That means it cannot glide and maintain its velocity. So the moment it hits the air particles in the atmosphere, the resistance is enough to decelerate it very quickly. So in order for us to continue on our flight path, we have to burn our engines constantly to ensure that we maintain hypersonic flight, lest we fall onto the ground like a brick. So we will I will burn the engines to ensure that we fly at about Mach 3 or 3 times the speed of sound. Now at about 11,000 meters of altitude, we're just gliding up above the thin clouds of this desert planet. So we are at about a few hundred kilometers towards the landing base. If you look forward at about 11 o'clock, now 12 o'clock, you see black streaks. That's the landing pad, or the landing planetary base, where we are going to finish the tutorial by landing. So a large part of the game is just enjoying the views. Still at the atmosphere, you can see the nebula, or the stellar dust, and very beautiful stars in space where we just left. and then our engines are now at about 67% fuel. We have managed to use them efficiently. So we are still dropping velocity very quickly. If you remember, I said we are dropping due to the resistance, so we have to maintain Mach 1 or above 340 meters per second, which is the speed of sound. So when we accelerate, when we break the speed of sound, the sound barrier will see a sonic boom. The sonic boom flashes, and we maintain a hypersonic flight. Even though this planet is modeled like the Earth, you can see that the valleys have sort of blue hue, particularly due to the iron deposits. The rocks and the mineral deposits here. It also has a lot of iron. You can see that the soil is red. So at this point, we are now at the last leg of the tutorial. If you sticked at this point, now we are coming in for landing. So we want to fly, maintain now subsonic velocity, fly below the speed of sound. This spacecraft can land vertically, so we will just decelerate and reduce our altitude, and then extend our landing gear, and then have our thrusters face downwards. Get landing gear. Collision alert, but that's not to worry. There goes our landing.